Wow! E puternic. Bună dimineața! O să vă rugăm să veniți în față la masă. După cum vedeți, sunt multe scaune libere încă. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being with us today. My name is Mihai Sandu. I'm the Deputy General Director of Romanian International Development Cooperation Agency. And together with my friend from Brussels, Iurai Macin from the European Policy Center, will be your host for this very interesting panel. First of all, let me address my personal congratulations to the organizers of this event, our friends from the Euro-Atlantic Center, Resilience Center, and also to the partners from Brussels, the European Policy Center, for being with us today. This session, entitled Analytic Tools for Measuring and Evaluating Resilience, might seem a little bit technical, but I'm sure that it will provide us with enough tools to understand exactly what resilience means and what resilience is about and how we can not just build it, but also develop it and develop ourselves in this aspect. And I remember the personal takes that I was in my first year as a student, I believe, when this term first came into how to say, into attention, and I can't believe how fast and how far we have gone with studying this phenomenon that basically affects not just how we resist, but how we come back after every crisis situation. With us today, we have a number of 6 amazing experts in the field. 4 of us, 4 of them are here today with us, and 2 with our colleagues in Brussels. I will present them shortly for you from left to right, and then I'll pass the floor to our friends in Brussels, to Iurai, to also say a few words, and then begin our presentation. So, to the left is Mr. Frederic Petit. Mr. Petit is a project officer at the European Commission Joint Research Center in the unit E2 on space connectivity and economic security, while also serving as a liaison director with the European Commission for the International Association of Critical Infrastructure Protection Professionals. He is also associate editor for the International Journal of Critical Infrastructure and Protection and member of the editorial board of the American Society of Civil Engineers, Journal of Infrastructure Systems. Mr. Petit, welcome. Mr. Arpad Todor, who is also the representative of our host of the European Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center, is a professor and PhD supervisor at the Faculty of Political Science with International University of Political and Administrative Studies in Romania, where he is a coordinator of the Master in Environmental Studies and Sustainable Development and teaches courses on public policies at European Union level. He also worked for many years, I think, at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a public policy coordinator on projects related to European affairs, international aid and resilience to disinformation and hybrid threats. He has also been, between 2022 and 2024, a deputy director within a directorate inside the Euro-Atlantic Center for Resilience. Mr. Todor, welcome. To my right, Madam Victoria Dovichenko, who is a widely recognized and published expert on the issues of hybrid warfare, strategic communication with particular emphasis on relations between Ukraine and the European Union as well as NATO. Currently, she is involved in conducting research on the strategies of Ukraine's victory and its implications for the Black Sea area as well as European security architecture. This project is a joint cooperation between the Center for Geopolitics at the University of Cambridge and the Center for Defense Strategies in Kiev. Mr. Bodichenko, welcome. And last but not least, Professor Bogdan Constantin Ivanescu, who is a researcher at the Center for European Studies at the Alexandru Ioan Cuza University in Iași. During the past 5 years, he was actively involved in innovative research related to territorial resilience, being also a member of Regrow EU Observatory on Resilience, an institutional platform for giving more scientific base for the policy and decision-making process. Professor Ivanescu, welcome. Juraj, I may now pass the floor to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mihai. I hope you can hear me in Bucharest. And good morning, everyone, to both in Brussels, but also in Bucharest. Thank you. I would like to thank you first and foremost to the Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center for this opportunity to work with you on such an important topic as resilience. As you know, I know it is already 10 o'clock in Bucharest. It's something after 9 o'clock in Brussels. So we usually don't do events at such an early time, but I think it attests to the fact that we're resilient. So it's a good start the debate on resilience with resilient people. So Mihai has already introduced the topic, so I won't take a lot of your time on that. And I know you all, most of you are experts, and all of you are experts on resilience. You know that it's an important topic. We're expecting a report by President Inisto on resilience quite soon. So, and this topic will determine also the political autumn in this season, and the discussions both in the European Parliament and the European Council, NATO, and other institutions. To discuss the topics, especially measurement of resilience, we were a bit unsure how to create a bridge between Brussels and Bucharest, and we decided that the best way to do it would be to have experts, academics in Bucharest with heavy expertise that can really unpack the most important issues for us. And then we decided in Brussels we'll bring more political perspectives. You know, we want to unpack how resilience is addressed on the political level, what the main issues are, and what the main political and security risks are for Europe that our continent currently faces, and we need to counter Russia, China, and also other actors, but also non-state actors. You know, what have you. And to address these issues, I have two great speakers. On my left, I have Rasa Junkevičienė, who's a MEP from Lithuania since 2019, for European People's Party. And also, Rasa, you worked served as Lithuanian Minister of Defense between 2008 and 2012. We know that you rang the bell far before Russia was kind of serious threat by all Europeans. So we'll be happy to have your perspective. And on my right, I have Oana Lungescu, the longest-serving NATO spokesperson, and who's now affiliated with RUSI, as far as I understand, as a distinguished fellow, but also as a special external advisor at the European Policy Center on Transatlantic Affairs and Transatlantic Security. So that's it from my side. Just maybe a bit of a housekeeping note. This debate will have 2 rounds. So first we'll have one speaker from Bucharest and one speaker from Brussels, one speaker from Bucharest. So 3 speakers. Then Q&A session, and another round, another Q&A session. So I really would like to underline that we want to make this as interactive as possible. So please, if you have any question or comments, don't hesitate to chip in. We will be more than happy to have your perspectives on these issues. So, and with that, I'll pass the floor back to Mihai in Bucharest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're right. We are very confident that this will be an interactive meeting for us all. And well, let's now pass the floor to the real dealers of this panel, to our experts, and I will begin with Professor Arpa Tudor, who will approach the topic of Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center Enhanced Analytic Resilience Index 2024, detailing on the scope, purpose, and development of the index compared to similar ones. Professor Tudor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dacă puteți să porniți PowerPoint-ul. So I will use the PowerPoint just as a visual aid. The Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center was created in 2021, and we are very proud. Whenever we present the center, we say that our appearance was saluted in the communique of the Brussels NATO summit. And we started as a very young institution in this quite competitive landscape to understand, to form a collective of analysts, researchers, to understand what is, let's say, the landscape of threats, to contribute at the same time to try to propose an approach to measure resilience that is, let's say, has this perspective from a country that is near to the greatest military confrontation since the World War II. And okay. And basically, in our readings, dacă puteți să dați la slide. Oh, okay. We realized in our discussion that at the moment the existing indexes, and there are quite a few, and I'm glad that Mr. Petit is here to also talk about the experience of the Joint Research Center in dealing this, do not cover some of the aspects that are very important in evaluating countries' resilience to various type of threats. And for example, in our Resilient project, we created the first public policy meant to deal with institutional resilience in Romania. And we also organized various courses. For example, we had 45 state secretaries from various agencies, so close to a quarter of the government, and we discussed about their understanding of resilience. And my impression, when I discussed with my colleagues, was the same, that we don't have a current common understanding of what means to be resilient on the various aspects. While we have specialists and we have systems, for example, like the emergency system that works very well, we don't have, let's say, a culture of resilience, and not even close to having a common understanding. And within this context, I started to work in the end of the last year on creating this resilience index. And initially, I thought that I will adapt some of the existing tools. And the most important aspect that determined me to propose something totally new was that most of the existing indexes were focusing more on, say, public policy and quality of government aspect. And I said, okay, well, it's very important to have a quality of government and is social trust in government. Is still not what we discuss whenever we have panels like this, and what people refer to what resilience is. So the main mission was to, okay, puteți să dați încă un slide? Oh, okay. And basically, in creating this index, we review all the existing databases, looking for high quality data. I also read quite a lot of literature, and I try to understand what are the limitations of the existing literatures, of the existing analytical tools. And in most of the cases, I've seen that they contain too many variables that refer to prerequisites of resilience, but do not measure directly what resilience is. And also, many times resilience is used as a background concept that allows a broad constellation of meanings and understanding. And this is basically this lack of precision is what urged me to try to get something that hopefully is slightly more, let's say, not better, but more more efficient a way to measure resilience. And also, there is a limited incorporation of dynamics, except for the EU dashboard on resilience. And one of the sources of this limitation is simply caused by the fact that most of the data, if you look, they don't change for the same country from year to year. So you expect that, for example, the change in data for Ukraine since 2014 was minimal in most variables, which is crazy because it's if you see there since the annexation of Crimea, so many things happen in Ukraine, but the data, it doesn't appear in the data. So this is one of the important limitations. And basically what I started to do was to simply collect all existing databases from there are specific indexes that look on risk or high quality of government data, you know, from the World Bank, the IMF, and various other institutions. And basically, I created a huge database and I started to work through various statistics to understand what is there, to look at the correlations, you know, the usual stuff that is done in creating an index, and also look on some of the, let's say, best good lessons in creating such indexes. And in the end, I also try to create an index that is, let's say, comparable with some of the other very important and, let's say, cited indexes, like the State Resilience Index that measures the same thing as we do, the FM Global Resilience Index, the National Resilience Index, and the EU Dashboard for Resilience. And basically, the approach that we proposed in this in creating this index was to look at aspects that contain the capacity of countries to react to various threats. And I will just put this is the, let's say, the logic of the model is that we have general factors that foster resilience, the three stages of resilience: preparedness, shock resistance, coping with shocks, crisis recovery and adaptation, and exogenous risks. And this is is something that is peculiar to this index, is that we consider that risk factors, like for example, being an area with high risk of earthquakes, is something that actually helps your strengthening your resilience, because basically you as a country have to react, and logically is that you will learn from these factors that affect your resilience. One of the aspects that I realized as I was approaching to finalize the index is that we could also structure the index in such a way that it will, let's say, create in a window to what are the NATO 7 requirements for civil preparedness. So although all the elements were there, I just arranged them in also to be comparable. And I had the opportunity to present the index to the NATO civil experts, and also to present it to the NATO headquarters. And it was really interesting because basically there was a comparison possibility to compare the data from the index with the data that results from NATO's evaluation. So basically, because this is based only on public data, it's a very good, let's say, X-ray in what, let's say, the state are reporting, what public databases are referring to. And basically, this is the logical structure of the index. We have the risks that affect the prerequisite and all the other components of the index. And the most important limitation, and then I'll start, is the fact that the existing data, the high quality data, doesn't really doesn't change. And many times, if you look in how it was collected, you see that there are some experts assessment. You have 3-4 experts. And the data doesn't change. And this is, you know, we don't have a solution for the moment, but it's a problem. If you have again, coming to this shocking example of Ukraine, And another aspect is that basically Ukraine was, from this index and all the other indexes, one of the least resilient countries in the world. And we've seen that it is not the case, because what we use to measure this, and I will show you this one, in the eastern region, these are the data for the East European and the Eastern countries. Ukraine and all the data is one of the least resilient. And this is a problem of the measurement. And in my idea, in order of these indexes to be able to inform public policy making, they have to be more reflective of what is really happening in the. So this was when I thought about creating this panel. This was the main question I had. So how can we make these indexes really efficient and good as a public policy instrument? My opinion is that at this moment we still need to do a lot of work. This is where you can access the index if you want to go through it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Todor, for this presentation. I will now pass the floor back to you, Rai, in Brussels.
Thank you, Mihai, and thank you, Arpad, for your very interesting presentation. I was also intrigued by the fact you mentioned about Ukraine, that if analyzed under the criteria used, it would have been considered one of the least resilient countries in the world, and which we, in fact, is the opposite. So thank you, Arpad, for presenting how to measure resilience. But here in Brussels, I would like to ask Rasa to explain why we should measure resilience, and why is it important that European countries are able to respond to the shocks. You know, we saw Lithuania placing Dragon teeth to prevent Russian tanks rolling in, potentially. So why do you think it's important and to fend off also hybrid warfare coming from Russia? And what the practices can you share with us? We know that Lithuania is a country that's never neglected its security. So why should other countries listen to the Lithuanians now, and what are the current efforts on resilience and in general of preparedness to withstand potential Russia's hybrid warfare we witness also on the European level? If you can briefly address those two issues.
You're right. I'm sorry for intervening. We're having. Oh, it's resolved. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for invitation to be here with you. Myself, I am not a professor. I am very much more like a politician practitioner. Started in Soviet times when Lithuania was occupied as medical doctor in very small Lithuanian city. And at that time, I even couldn't expect that I will be seated somewhere in Brussels in front of you, in front of people in Bucharest, and speak about so serious issues. Because, history is interesting thing. And I will start speaking about resilience with the main message I would like to send to all of you. Our resilience will be measured by history, because the history is today. We are witnessing what I have in mind. I have in mind our ability of democracies, of EU, of NATO, to win this war, to help Ukraine to win this war. It's most important test. And our ability, our willingness, our political will, our understanding how important it is to defeat this evil of 21st century, I mean, Putin's Russia. And its proxies like Iran, like also China behind, of course, because this war is like autocracies, dictatorships versus democracies. It's not like conflict somewhere far in European East, and that's why we have to think blah, blah, blah about some peace negotiations, giving piece of land for this dragon and so on and so on. So this is resilience of the highest level of politicians, resilience in medium level of politicians, our ability to understand the threat, common threat assessment, to have it at least on the table, and resilience of our societies. Today, fortunately, we have or had, since this large-scale war started, very high support, be it in Portugal, Spain, Italy. I am not speaking about my country, our countries, or Nordic countries. They are very close to understanding what Russia is about, Putin's Russia is about, but also in the other countries. And it helped a lot us politicians to be as much united as possible. So this was resilience for those last few years. That's why we have European Union more supportive to Ukraine as many expected for. Putin didn't expect that we will be able to support in such a strong way, be it vocally or be it financially. Of course, it's not enough. Today's situation is different than it was 1 year ago, and we have to change our understanding. But nevertheless, we are in front of new commission with first in the history defense commissioner. I am proud that very good friend of mine, Andris Kubilius, my collaborator, how to say friend, brother in arms, I would say in politics, he will become a commissioner for defense, and of course he knows what to do. But on the other hand, it's just the beginning, and the war is going now. We have to help Ukraine not to be defeated next few months. Not only to speak about theoretical some kind of basic issues to build our defense union here in this continent. Yes, we have to do this, but now it's very complex issues. So resilience is I can give you many examples, good examples and maybe bad examples, especially in the context of this war. Maybe situation is much better on resilience than it was when I was Minister of Defense. Somebody will be surprised if I say that 2008 and 2012, last year of my term, I was really, really concerned. I was depressed because of the situation on security, what's going on, because Russia started its preparations for something or for some military activities far before 2022 and far before 2014 when Crimea was annexed. And they were ready to test NATO at that time via Baltic states. Nobody was thinking about that, except maybe Americans started to do this, to think at about 2012. In NATO, some people around this table will prove that I am saying the truth. Russia was not on agenda at all, official agenda of defense ministerials, not at all. So nobody cares, and we were not ready at all. And at that time, Russia could have really a lot of success if they would try to test us, because our societies were not ready, our politicians were not ready, our military were not ready. Those newcomers to NATO were only formally on paper member of NATO, nothing on the ground. Bucharest summit in 2008 was disaster. Not because of this nice city. Of course, this nice city is very nice and I like it. But because of the decisions were not done, the right decisions on NATO enlargement. I mean, on Ukraine and Georgia membership action plan, and that was the message to Russia, to Putin: grab as many as you can. And that was the message also, that we are weak, we cannot, and the same is today. So I will maybe stop here, not saying something more, and just maybe finalizing my first intervention, quoting Ursula von der Leyen mission letter to new Commissioner of Defense and Space. And in the very first lines, first sentences of this mission letter, she is, I will shorten a little bit this sentence, but you will understand. So what is the main task for Defense Commissioner and of course for all of us? I am quoting, I am starting to quote, to deliver full spectrum European defense capabilities, readying the EU and member states for the most extreme military contingencies. What does it mean to translate into normal people language? To be ready for war. Is a message for us. So resilience, it means societies, it means, I don't know, what what else can be. We have to be ready for that. And Defense Commissioner alone, well, of course, will not do this. I think Finland is the best example of readiness or resilience. So we don't need to investigate new bicycle. We just have to take the best examples, and I am saying this very openly. Finland, for me, is the best case scenario if we speak about very concrete threat. I mean Putin's Russia and all its proxies around globally, and so on and so on. So I will stop here, waiting other interventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rasa, for your intervention. And although I agree with you that resilience will definitely be measured by history, and of course the better preparedness, the better the grade from the history. So definitely, of course, Finland is a great example. They have this total this comprehensive security framework, which is very important. And I think it's also good that Finland has joined the alliance, so that NATO can also learn.
Can I add what I have had in mind for Finland, including conscript armed forces? It is the best way to have our societies ready, at least to understand the threats and be prepared.
Thank you. And with that, I pass the floor back to you, Mihai, in Bucharest.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will now invite Mr. Frederic Petit to present his topic on measuring critical entity resilience with a relevant overview regarding EU policy landscape on critical entities and an excellent analysis on not only what resilience means and how we should build it, but also on the challenges and opportunities in building resilience. Please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you to the organizers for inviting us to speak today on this very important topic. I think I have some slides. If they can be shared, it would be great. Or I can speak without the slide.
No, they do
it.
Să deschideți pe PowerPoint-ul.
Thank you. So I work for the Joint Research Center, that's the scientific body of the Commission supporting development of policies, and I work specifically in the team on hybrid threats and critical entity resilience. So specifically on the transposition of the critical entity resilience directive, which happened yesterday with the NIS2. So that's a big event for the Union. So today, we want to talk about resilience, say different definition, different metrics, different analytics. So it's important to see that when you consider society, that's a system of systems. It groups different elements. So you have different ways to see that. Obviously, you have the people, that's an important element. You have the governance. You have element of sustainable development, economic, social element, all this type of thing. And infrastructure is one of the pillars. On the right side here, maybe you don't see very well, but that's a figure from the core model we developed with hybrid COE on hybrid threats. And society is based on 13 domains. Infrastructure is only one of them. And all these domains are interdependent. So the dysfunction or issues on one domain will affect the other one. So when you think about resilience, societal resilience, or resilience in general, you need to consider all these type of elements and the systemic approach and the dynamic of these different elements. The challenge is the fact that the failure, as I said, that can lead to cascading failure, domino effects across all these domains, and we are in evolving threat landscape. We heard about Ukraine, the war currently, the thing on climate change, all these emerging threats, hybrid threats, where it's an intent, different capabilities, all this type of thing. So resilience is the fact that you need to consider this element. And that's a switch also from protection to resilience. So you cannot be protected against everything. Protection is important, but your system can fail. You can have this cascading failure. And how can you make your system more resilient to be sure that you will maintain your operation? So continuity of operation, business continuity, if you're in a business, that is type of thing. So if we focus now more on my field, more the critical entities, I talk about CR and NIS2. So that came into transposed yesterday into legislation in different EU countries. But the big thing is, first, it elevated discussion from infrastructure to entities. So we talk now about the operators of essential services. That's what we want to maintain. So in terms of resilience, that's not only a question of infrastructure resilience, but also organizational resilience. So that's other elements that should be considered. We switch from protection to resilience, and there's another big concern. At European level, we go from 2 sectors, energy and transportation, to 11 sectors, including water, wastewater, but also space ground segment or public administration. You can imagine all the challenges it can lead there. And one of the big important elements, again, is this thing of all hazards. So we can talk about threat agnostic approach, hybrid threats, all this type of thing. Cascading effects, cross-border, cross-sector effects. So that's all this type of thing. So how you're not focusing only on one infrastructure or one entities, but trying to have a systemic approach of things. So that's the main challenge. I think we lost the slides, but here. So that, anyway. So the thing is, my next slide was, here. So we talk about resilience, but critical entity resilience, but at the end, we always go back to critical infrastructure protection. And we talk about risk assessment, risk analysis. And risk analysis and resilience analysis are 2 different things. So when you talk about risk, that's a combination of threat, vulnerability, consequences. So that's a description you see on the curve. When you see resilience, that's really all this type of thing on continuity of operation. So we consider different type of elements. There are also traditionally, if you think of different sectors, for example, energy, we talk a lot about reliability. Reliability and resilience are slightly different. Reliability maybe that's short-term event, you maintain your operation, where resilience are longer-term thinking and will lead ultimately to sustainable development, which is also way bigger. So that's this type of thing that need to be considered. Here you have the definition from the Critical Entity Resilience Directive. So that's all this element of prevention, protection, response, resistance, mitigation, absorption, accommodation, recovery, adaptation to changes. So all these elements should be included somehow in the resilience metrics, resilience indicators. And when you think about resilience, like risk, you have a third approach. So the first is to develop some type of indices, indicators, and Professor Todor talked about that. But the second tier is to include some element of decision analysis, operation research, military or mathematical model, this type of thing. You're familiar with this element. And tier 3 is really the dynamic approach, systemic approach, when you have better model, flow model, and you can use new technology like AI or this type of thing. So right now we're still somehow on a tier 1, tier 2, and the goal is more and more to go to this tier 3. But the more you advance in the different tiers, more time and money are needed for developing this type of tools. But decision analytic tools are really important to make a fast decision. So quickly here, that's some example of, Professor Todo talked about that. There are several indices here. That's just some example of capability developed, a small part of capability developed at the GRC. So we have some element on cross-border risk. You have some indicators. Professor Todo talked about some of these synthetic indicators. We have informed that's on disaster recovery and humanitarian indicators. We have a lot of work on the hybrid threats, again, with the hybrid COE. So that's a type of capabilities we develop. But there are also all the program, European program that's serious, Horizon Europe, where you have lots of research. And also a big important thing, I think, in terms of resilience, it needs multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary approaches, and it can do that only by collaborating. He had some issues for people in securities that you need to share information. How do you share information to be more resilient, but still in a secure way? It's a big, big, big question. So that type of thing. But to finish my presentation, I can go to the last slide. Sorry, I'm trying to feel better than me. Just working on resilience here. So that's a thing on the way forward. I think there are several elements that are very, very important. So resilience need to be occurring at all levels. That's a whole of society approach. So I'm focusing on a specific thing, critical infrastructure or critical entities, but that's only a small part of this big picture. You have this element on cascading impact. So the fact that this, the system of system, our failure will propagate. So we talk about climate change, and it's important thing. We saw all the thing about natural hazard. We saw all the thing, the war, hybrid threat occurring in Ukraine. But we all experience how it affected the people worldwide. And so that's the type of thing that we need to consider. There's a lot of things about switch also from risk and resilience. We need to consider also the low frequency, high severity element. And that's not traditional in risk management. Usually these things will never happen, so we don't need to care about that. We need to go beyond the physical and economic damages. That's a big question of long-term investment and driver funding. A big thing also that Professor Todo mentioned, data availability. I said that we use for some synthetic indicators, we use old past data, but on dependency, interdependency system of system for critical entities, there are some connection we still don't understand and we don't have data at all. So that's where we need to work more on this type of thing. So this thing require multi-stakeholder engagement, require information sharing, but also to include not only on our side, infrastructure resilience, but also organizational resilience. So you see that this element are big, complex elements. That's why also you have a multidisciplinary panel with people with background in political sciences and people in engineering or different fields. So all these fields will contribute to resilience at the end. So thank you for the time today. I hope that brings some element for discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Petit, and thank to all our first three panelists. Like Yurai has already mentioned, we have decided to split a little bit the question and answer session because we have such a massive panel with 6 very relevant speakers. And we have allowed ourselves, Yurai and I, the luxury to also have the possibility to address questions to the panelists. And I will first ask Yura if he has a question for the panelists, particularly those in Bucharest, perhaps.
Thank you, Mihai. So before going to the Q&A, and please prepare your questions, and then I can collect them, and then you can answer also mine. My question will be, and I want to build on what Frederick just said. So of course, building resilience is a multi-stakeholder endeavor and requires information sharing. And Arpad, you presented, you show your presentation that we have EU dashboards, for instance. There's also negative assessments. But also there are researchers like you who produce their own measurements, and now on their own criteria for measuring resilience. So I would have not that much of a technical question, but now, given the deteriorating security environment in Europe, do you feel that you are heard more, that you have policymakers' ear now when you point to some challenges in resilience? Do you think these channels are now much more open than before? So this will be my question, and I would also like to ask our audience here in Brussels if there are any questions for our speakers. Gentlemen on my right side, you can use your microphone there.
Okay, thank you very much. So the question I would like to ask is kind of a commercial one, because we've heard the word competitiveness a lot in the last few weeks, and I would like to ask, how does the concept of resilience relate to the one of competitiveness? What implications are there? If we are resilient, are we also competitive? I mean, I would be curious to hear your perspectives on how these two concepts interact for the, let's say, better of both parties. Thank you.
Thank you. In a standard moderation way, I would ask you to whom you redirect your question, if possible, or to all.
Okay, so going back, I am Iulian Luco. I am a trainee at the Romanian Perm Rep, and my question is open to all speakers.
Yep. And do you have any more questions in the room in Brussels? Yeah, and my colleague from EPC. Please introduce yourself and also your question.
Good morning, and thank you very much for this inspiring and insightful session on resilience. My name is Mada Henry Magbeti. I'm a policy analyst at EPC. My question is also for everyone, really. I want to know how effective can the communication of resilience be put forward so that, policymakers can really understand what is resilience in terms of a general aspect of Europe.
Thank you. So we have to at least, if I calculate my question, is the importance of communication and communicating resilience, and also competitiveness, as far as I understand. So maybe Rasa or Anadu want to have a take on that, or shall we go to Bucharest? Let's go to Bucharest first. Mihai, it's in your good hands now.
Okay, Bucharest here. So I will invite the two speakers to answer the questions that were addressed first, and then we'll try to wrap up with the questions here.
So first I'll answer to the first and the last question regarding communication. So I will just speak about our experience in Romania. I was amazed initially that many policymakers were hearing on some aspects of resilience for the first time. I think what happened is that you at the level of, let's say, directors in ministries, agencies, there is a much higher level of socialization with this culture of resilience, but there is no communication between levels, and this was one of the arguments of the project. So I think there is openness, and as soon as people start to understand, to socialize within, let's say, this culture of resilience and linking various threats, liabilities of states with what needs to be done, there is a high level of openness. And regarding the data, as a researcher, I know, and everyone who works with data knows that in order to create some reliable indexes, to collect high quality data, to unify data from expert assessment, there's a lot of work. So any data that is collected under, let's say, the veil of secrecy, as many institutions have in their, let's say, they work like that because this is how different institutions work. Most probably that will not withstand the scrutiny of scientific evidence. Okay, so yes, but this is something that you cannot change and make it very. It's a puzzle that we have to, let's say, try to answer by using open data. So that's something that we cannot really fix. And regarding the competitiveness, I think that there is a cost to creating more resilience in all type of infrastructure, all kind of operation. But this cost, if it's imposed by public policy on all entities in a specific sector, is something that doesn't really change competitiveness. Of course, if you only, let's say, European firms have to adopt some measures, but others from the extra-communitary area do not, there is a challenge to competitiveness. Thank you.
I think Professor Todor provided a lot of information. So just maybe complete on some element. I think the developing a culture of resilience, population or society in general is very important. So after that, in terms of information sharing, obviously for different level of sharing information for different needs. So for research, using open source information or this type of thing is totally understandable. I think in terms of for national security, homeland security, you need to have other type of mechanism to share this information needed to be more resilient and to develop this culture of resilience. But I think the culture of resilience is already here. The people talk about continuity of operation or business continuity, and that's not exactly the same, but very similar to resilience. So in terms of business, you have a lot of standards on business continuity. You have new standard on organizational resilience. In the military, they use also continuity of operation. So they have already this type of culture. We need to build more on that, but I think to develop also the pastoral relationship between the different domains. So the people, usually everything is organized in silo. If you think about the systemic approach and resilience, you need to break the silos. So how you do that, it's a big challenge in businesses or in governance, but that need to be done. In terms of competitiveness and the implication, for me, if you're not resilient, first you have legal implication now with the new directive. You have some mechanisms that will put in place that will force you to implement resilience measure if you are a critical entity. So that by regulation, you will have an obligation to do so. But I think if the people go with the ISO standard on business continuity or this type of element, that's because they understand that resilience is key for their business. So you need to tell your partner that you are resilient. You have all this element of supply chain and all this type of thing that to make business, people will require this type of approach now. So that's, I think we're still changing so slowly, but we're going there.
Okay, thank you. I have a short question for Rasa, for the speaker from Brussels, and then I will also give the floor to the audience in Bucharest. So my question would be, particularly since you have approached your political background and the expertise that it provides, is leadership at the top level of states a mark of how resilient a society is? And how can we understand the resilience by how good or bad are the leaders produced by a society? Should you answer now, or do you prefer first to get some more questions? How should we proceed? Okay.
Thank you very much. It's not very easy to understand every word, so I was just asking a little bit corrections. Yeah, as if I understood correct, leadership, resilience, our experience at once. I am correct?
The question was, how can we understand resilience by how good or bad are the leaders produced by a society?
Okay, leadership and resilience. Yes. Yeah, I can try answer your question by giving some very concrete example. Energy security, which is utmost important topic since this large-scale war started, 2022. Gas, oil, especially gas, especially for Germany, other countries, and our experience in Lithuania. We realized immediately when Putin came to power, reading their messages, it was very openly, they were saying that energy will be, it was mentioned in 2001, by the way, that energy will be the main political tool for Russia to regain power across globally, not only in Europe. And we felt this immediately because we had some new political parties with background, oil, gas background, I mean, business in Russia. And they had very clear task and duty to organize those political parties to win election or to have good result in election, to be part of ruling coalition, to take positions, be it in economy, be it in elsewhere, and to use this oil and gas tool coming from Russia to reverse it into the politics. The same to media, the same to societies, non-governmental, different kind of organizations, to have such kind of network of Russian Federation interests, Putin's interest in the society. It means to decrease resilience of the society and to diminish, to change the main goals formulated when we became independent, to be a part of NATO, part of EU, and so on and so on. Open market, open society, and everything else. So, when government, I was part of it since 2008. We were able to. We won election, and Andrius Kubilius, by the way, I am quote again mentioning him as future defense commissioner, became prime minister. Our main strategic goal formulated at the time was exactly about that, to decrease and to change our energy dependence from Russia to independent. And today we are so lucky that in 2022, we were a nation without zero dependence on Russia, on gas, when the time came. Of course, we were not able to predict at that time that the war, such kind of war will start in 2022. I mean, practically. But we expected that Putin's Russia, of course, will increase pressure, and we have to be diverse. We must change this 100% dependence on Russia into independent energy resources from outside. So this is our story of success, I would say. And Ursula von der Leyen mentioned this 1.5 years ago during her State Union in European Parliament, saying that we were not enough, listening not enough. And by the way, LNG terminal, when we started to build it in 2011-12, or at least projected it, asked money from European Union, answer was €0. We did this by our own. LNG, very expensive for not rich country. It was really a challenge to build this LNG terminal. It was a lot of, but leadership helped us. So answering to your question, it's very important to have strong leadership with very clear strategic goals for the future, understanding how security is important. So I will not go into the more details. A lot I can tell a lot about resilience in disinformation, resilience in cyber, resilience everywhere, because we live in such geopolitical situation. We have to be resilient, otherwise we will disappear from this map of European continent.
Thank you very much. That is an excellent example of how strong a state can become with good leaders. I will now open the floor to the audience, and I'm thinking, since this is a large audience, maybe we should address groups of 3 to 4 questions at the beginning, let them answer, and then we see if we can have some more. So, please.
Can I?
Yes?
There's just one, and there was a question on communication. And of course, Oana, as a former journalist and longest serving NATO spokesperson, has some take on that. So she would just quickly like to address the issue of communication resilience if possible. And then we can go to questions if you're okay with that.
Okay, in the meantime, please, the audience, prepare your questions.
Okay, many thanks și bună dimineața tuturor la București. The question on communications, I think, first of all, we need to communicate the threat. Resilience, of course, is a very generic term. In some languages, frankly, the word resilience doesn't exist. It has to be translated. So I think we also need to break it down into what does resilience mean. The resilience means the ability to deter and prevent, but deter mainly, resist and recover from attacks that may fall short of military force. And I think what we've seen in the last few months, especially since the beginning of this year, is also the willingness to communicate the threats to our societies much more publicly and openly. Of course, the COVID pandemic and the war in Ukraine have made the need for resilience much more urgent and real to people. And I think a lot of it is about making it real. This is not just about discussions among experts. It's not just about finding ways to assess resilience, important though they are. I think it's also about making it real to people. And what we see right now is the largest campaign of sabotage and hybrid attacks since the Cold War. So this is the reality that we have to deal with right now. And it is, to use the title of a Hollywood movie, everywhere, all the time, all at once. So this is what's happening. And this is a campaign of sabotage by Russia, but not just by Russia. As Rasa mentioned, we're talking about a whole range of state actors, including China, Iran, North Korea, Belarus, and others. And I think it's really important that in the last few days, actually, we've seen two very clear warnings, very detailed warnings from the German intelligence chiefs and from the head of the British MI5. And I would invite you over the weekend to have a look at the speech by the Director General of MI5, Ken McCallum, who said that in the last year, the number of state threat investigations in the UK has increased by 48%. And that's Russian and Iranian state actors turning to proxies, using criminal organizations, intelligence operatives, or just foreign nationals recruited online. These are the facts. The GRU is on a sustained mission to generate mayhem on British and European streets. In Germany, the head of the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution said Russian activities have reached a level in recent months that should be a wake-up call for everyone, with espionage and sabotage on the rise in terms of scale and severity. And one incident that he mentioned is in Leipzig in July, when a package caught fire before being loaded onto a delayed cargo plane. So had the cargo plane not been delayed, it may have exploded in mid-air. because of this package. The same, a very similar thing happened in the UK with the DHL package very recently that was discovered. In May, NATO issued 2 blunt statements on 2 successive days about this intensifying campaign of Russian hybrid activities with sabotage, assassinations, arson, cyber, electronic interference, disinformation. So I think all of these things are part of a loose but actually coordinated campaign. And we need to be aware, and that's why this discussion is so important, and communicating about it not just amongst ourselves, but to our citizens is so important. And that's where leadership is also important. But I would say finally that communicating not just the problem, but also the solutions is important. And I would just mention, Rasa rightly mentioned Finland, and other colleagues mentioned Finland, and I think we can talk about Finland and some of the things that they're doing, not least, for instance, in building civil protection shelters. And this is about building regulations. We're not talking about, military requirements, although some of them are. But I would just mention this report. It's a booklet that Sweden issues to every household regularly. And there's a new version out now. It's only in Swedish. So this is a copy of the previous one, which has been translated into English, which is called If Crisis or War Comes. And it's extremely detailed, extremely practical. What sort of food people should have at home, how you should be prepared for the first 72 hours, ideally for the first month, for the first week, when your government will be dealing with other things, but also about the will to resist, basically saying this is, if you hear that your government is giving up, don't believe it, we will resist. So it's about building this ability to resist in society and in every individual, and telling people about what they have to do, but also how they can contribute to the general will to resist and to recover. So I would say this sort of booklets, it's very simple. There's a clear template. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Sweden is doing it regularly. Let's all do it across EU countries. Let's do it in Romania. Let's do it across all NATO countries. It can be done. It shouldn't create panic. If we do it at the last minute, then it will create panic. Let's start doing these things now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So now to you, ladies and gentlemen, I'll give the floor. Please address questions, and please, we are a little bit in delay already, so let's keep our answers a little bit shorter. So please, if anyone has questions. Please, sir.
Radu Borduja, I'm the executive director of the Institute for the Euro-Atlantic Institute for Building Resilience from Moldova, from Chisinau. Thank you very much for the invitation for this nice forum, and thank you all the panelists for excellent presentations. I have an observation, a short one, and a question, which is a short one as well. So the observation is mostly geographical. What I have observed while attending those forums on resilience is basically that in Eastern Europe, we basically talk more of resilience in the context of defense. And you observed in this forum, again, representative from Baltic countries talked about conscription. And then we talked, about defense, whole of defense, and so on. The farther west we go, you observe this transitioning into business continuity, climate change, and so on. This is a different approach to resilience, different narratives, and I think we should find a common ground to basically tackle them. And my question is to the panelists about the measuring the resilience index. Do you factor in the military component? And if yes, could you please expand on this a bit? Thank you.
Thank you. I think you had a question, right? Victoria, please.
Thanks a lot. I actually have a follow-up questions to Anu, to your fantastic example of Sweden. I'm Victoria Vdovichenko, Center for Defense Strategies, Kyiv, and Center for Geopolitics, Cambridge. I'm here in Romania, but at the same time representing Ukraine. You're absolutely right. We are talking about different modus operandi and mindset that we are in the perception to the communities about the resilience. And my really simple, but at the same time deep question, how to spread this experience of Sweden, that's basically what Ukraine is always saying, be prepared, to other countries, especially politicians. Because in some of the countries that are running now the elections or in 2025, it's absolutely not in the agenda, as well as the politicians are not willing to think what we say, making the robust, but at the same time resilient responses to not only hybrid threat, but kinetic threats. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's try another question. Please, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate the topics. When it comes to resilience, the question that I often have, and some of the slides that were up were really the best I've seen. How do we communicate and measure mathematically or economically advancements with resilience, particularly with all the elections? And I do agree, leadership needs to prepare, but we also need to communicate effectively that we've made progress, the cost-benefit analysis of that progress, and how do we continue to move forward with that? What I think we lack is a way to communicate out to society the cost-benefit analysis of resilience. And any comments or examples on that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe
If I can, there's also one question from Brussels.
Okay, another question from Brussels.
Gentleman on my left.
Thank you very much. Ignacio Ninas from European Commission Secretariat General, here in a personal capacity. A small question. The Commission is doing actually quite a lot on resilience preparedness, and you are probably aware that President has asked the former Finnish President Sauli Niinistö to produce a report on a very broad preparedness for the future of the EU. And also the preparedness union strategy was announced in the political guidelines for the years to come. So work is already starting on that. But my question related to this and related to all the discussion which we have here today, especially maybe to the present politicians here in the room, because wherever I go as the Commission official, one message I hear is there is no money. There is no money, there is MFF, everything is spent, we cannot expect to get more, we have more borrowed for the resilience and recovery facility, we will have to be repaying these debts, so forget about that. So maybe this is a little bit provocative, but I think this is a very important question to ask.
Yeah, if I may, Rasa has a very hard stop, and I think it was addressed to a politician in the room. I think. Yeah, and I know you have a hard stop. So can you please address the question on the money side?
Maybe I will try to combine somehow in answer in combination of all questions, at least partially, not everything I will be able. In the first round of questions, it was a question about competitiveness and resilience. So look. Priorities of the next European Commission, two priorities, competitiveness and defense, security. It means that it's both are in one. Without economy, without our competitiveness, without what Draghi report is about, it's not possible to speak about defense, about our readiness, about our ability to achieve those goals, about preparedness for the war, at least for the worst here. So I will stop here on competitiveness, but about politician, about the resilience in politics, having in mind election, if I understood correctly, the question from Bucharest was something like that. Here, you know, despite that I was giving very positive examples saying that we did a lot, but also I am not as optimistic when I see what's going on during election, how effective very often this disinformation campaigns are, hatred is around, people are sensitive, people are watching, especially maybe my generation when they jumped into Facebooks or other parts of the social media, so they have no resilience sometimes, I feel, because they are looking to those screens at home, and they are taking everything into their mindsets, and that's really effective. And not only, for example, we are in Lithuania in between two parts of our election. And I see that not only Russia, but China as well is behind that trying. Yesterday, I had a meeting with Taiwanese former president here in Brussels. She was visiting. So if somebody wants to take any good example, some very good example how to resist disinformation, every single day, thousands of messages from mainland China coming to Taiwan, using the same language, by the way, and they are still resistant and they have systems. So if someone wants to have this experience, so no better experience than Taiwanese experience to protect themselves and political system as well, election, to protect election from disinformation, influence, and so on and so on. So about your question was about money, about that we always are complaining that we have no money, but we have to do something better than especially in the light, in the context of those challenges here. But here I will be not so optimistic. The same also when I was speaking about election, about influence into political system. Why? Because we as so-called democratic West, we are richest or most powerful economically union, not only European Union, but together with the United States, together with other countries, and we are able to win this war, to help Ukraine to win and to defeat Russia. But we are not winning, unfortunately, and the money spent for military purposes in Ukraine is, I don't know, hundreds of times Russia is prevailing. Not hundreds of times, but many times prevailing spendings for military than we. And it is also about resilience, because it's very difficult for politicians to say to the people that, listen, we are in trouble, and maybe next year you will be able to choose not 5 stars hotel next to Mediterranean, or maybe would be enough 4 stars hotel next to Mediterranean, because we are lack of money to defend ourselves or to help to win this war. Of course, it's like example. I am not saying that exactly about it's necessary to say about hotels, but at least as example, that is not easy for politicians. And those populists immediately would jump into the process, and they will say that we will do this without your suffering. We will find somehow, and blah, blah, blah. So Putin knows, and those dictators, they know our vulnerabilities as democracies. They know this, and they are using this in sometimes very well. But we will need strong leadership for next few years to convince our societies that we need to change our attitudes towards defense immediately. Our budget, a common European budget, is too small to
Could you please try to finish?
Yes, okay.
Thank you so much.
We need reforms inside European Union. We need to focus on enlargement of European Union. We need to increase our defense, and those challenges can overcome only strong political leaders. Without that, it will be really a disaster for the next generations to live here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Elsa. Mihai, over to you.
This proved to be more interactive than we hoped for. I will ask Frederick and Arpad to provide some very short answers, and then we have to jump up to the second session because we are already in delay and we have 3 more presentations, and perhaps a question and answer session from the end will be a little bit longer if our host will allow us. Thank you. Please.
Thank you. So, very good observation. Indeed, I hadn't thought about the military strength capacity. But because I wanted to say, as I put in, mirror with the NATO approach to measuring, I didn't introduce any military data related to military strength in the index. And this was the reason, because measuring military power is different from this was one choice. Then regarding the communicating on resilience, I would say this before the war started, we had the opinion survey in Romania on misinformation campaign that it was not publicized because it was for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. 90% of Romania, so 90, no, there is a lot of disinformation. They receive a lot of disinformation. 90% consider is generating really bad influence, etc. But on the same side, 80% of Romania wants no measures on the internet to regulate this. Okay, so there is this low equilibrium state in low trust, not caring, not trying to do anything, and this we see at the level of public communication. There is this shyness to approach, to discuss, okay, because people might become very wary about the possibility of war. So I think this is the case in many countries. Just keep it under the radar. We are part of NATO, the EU, and the last part of the answer regarding the money. I read the Romanian National Resilience Plan. There is no definition of resilience, and we analyze, and my intuition is the same in most of the cases. And I was expected from the European Commission to ask member states to put resilience there, to put things that will operationalize. There are investment plans. We use resilience because it's nice, but there is no resilience there. Thank you.
I will go quick. I don't know a lot about all the national risk assessment or things like that, but there is a definition of resilience in the Critical Entity Resilience Directive. So it applied to specifically critical entities, but it could apply to different domains. I think that a lot of things is about adaptation and all this type of thing. That's very important. So in terms of defense, I'm not aware of any synthetic indices, including specifically defense. Doesn't mean that not a lot of things is done in the field of defense related to resilience and things like that. But I think that the things are kept separated, and for good reason. But so it would be my quick answer about that. There was a question about the cost-benefit analysis of resilience. I think the challenge is the same as risk assessment in that case. So cost-benefit analysis is always a challenge, especially if you think about emergency management, this type of thing. So that's similar challenges. I think in resilience also, or in risk in general, that's a question of risk acceptability. And that's not only a question of economic value, so you add some challenges there. But there are a lot of work on this type of thing. But again, most of the indices, synthetic indices, they don't provide a cost value or improvement value on this type of thing. There's some work in that sense, but not so many. And I will stop there because I think our colleagues want to be able to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. There was one more question on Sweden experience that Victoria asked one now, but perhaps we can integrate the answer in your presentation. So, Juraj, back to you.
Thank you, Mihai. Indeed, there was a question to Oana, but I think you can take the question and together with my question about resilience and NATO, because it's resilience seems to be a buzzword, especially many people think it's a new phenomenon, it's a new concept, but NATO has resilience embedded in Article 3, which is a document, which is a Washington Treaty, that dates back from 1949. So Oana, can you take us? Can you give us a tour d'horizon of what resilience means for NATO? Now we used to be resilience against military threats, but now, of course, with hybrid threats going, the spectrum of resilience has increased also at NATO, I imagine. And also, please take on some of the questions being asked to you, addressed in Bucharest, but also here on communication. Over to you.
Thank you, Rai, and I'll try to answer especially some of the questions from Victoria, from Radu, and from Ignaz. Now, as you rightly said, resilience is in the DNA of NATO because it is practically embedded in Article 3 of NATO's founding Washington Treaty. Basically, resilience, the ability to resist armed attack, is a national responsibility and a collective commitment. And it underpins all the three core tasks that NATO has in its strategic concept. But let me take one step back before I talk about what NATO itself does and look at some of the facts and figures that I think will make very clear that the interconnection between defense and the private sector. And that also addresses Radu's question, because military efforts in how NATO sees defense and deterrence must be complemented by robust civil preparedness. That's the only way to reduce potential vulnerabilities and the risks of a military attack. During the Cold War, things were a bit clearer because governments, states had much greater control over infrastructure and over public services. Things have changed. Right now, 95% of transatlantic internet traffic, including military communications, is carried by undersea cables, mainly operated by the private sector. Around 90% of military transport for military operations is provided by civilian assets, railways, railway carriages. 75% of host nation support for NATO operations is sourced from local commercial infrastructure and services. And 70% of satellite communications used for defense purposes is provided by the commercial sector. So clearly, this is not just about governments, and defense is not just about our armed forces. It's also about how governments, how states interact, coordinate with the private sector, with industry, and also how nations work together with NATO, with the European Union, with everybody involved. This is an all of government, all of society effort, and it is, as the Finns and the Swedes define it, total defense. This is how we need to think about it. So we can't just think, this is what the EU does, this is what NATO does, this is what national governments do. We need to think together, and we need to think about this interrelationship between we as individuals, all of us here, all of you in Bucharest, and our governments and societies. The main, I think the main realization of the importance of resilience, despite all the efforts going on here for the last 75 years, was for NATO at the 2016 Warsaw Summit. So after the illegal annexation of Crimea, where NATO agreed 7 baseline requirements, and again, answering Radu's question, we heard about this at the beginning in the presentation. Those 7 baseline requirements very quickly are continuity of government and critical government services, reliant energy supplies, ability to deal effectively with uncontrolled movement of people and to deconflict these from NATO military deployments, resilient food and water resources, ability to deal with mass casualties and disruptive health crises, resilient civil communication systems, and resilient transport systems. So these are the 7 baseline requirements that were then strengthened further in 2021 at the Brussels summit after COVID. These objectives became formal resilience objectives to guide the nationally developed resilience goals and implementation plans of NATO allies. And also at NATO, we pushed for the designation of senior officials responsible for resilience. And they met for the first time in 2022, because every country, every ally used to have different people dealing with more or less the same thing, but with different job titles. They still have sometimes different job titles, but it's important that they get together and that they have greater clarity about what they do. In 22, NATO established this new Senior Resilience Committee, hosted the first annual Resilience Symposium, bringing together civilian and military leaders, policymakers, and industry experts. The new strategic concept, as I mentioned, identifies resilience as critical to all 3 core tasks. In 23, at the Vilnius summit, leaders agreed resilience objectives. So they were agreed at the highest possible level, and they highlighted the need to strengthen societal resilience. And importantly, also in 23, we had the establishment of the NATO EU task force on the protection of critical infrastructure, looking at energy, transport, digital infrastructure, and space. And there is a report out which I would encourage you to read. And finally, in 24, this year, the Washington summit, importantly, there was a decision to start integrating civilian planning into national and collective defense planning. So not to look at these 2 as separate things, but to start integrating civilian planning into NATO defense planning. And that would address threats against democratic systems, critical infrastructure, supply chains. And there's lots of other things that are being done in terms of a new Center for Protection of Critical Underwater Infrastructure, Joint Cyber Center. So I think all of this shows you that there's been a lot of work at NATO, a lot of work between NATO and nations, increasing amount of work between NATO and the EU. And I think that's very important, because we can't do these things on our own. These efforts are complementary. But ultimately, the foundation for resilience is deterrence and defense. We can have brilliant infrastructure and the defense of infrastructure, diversified energy supplies. But if we don't have strong defense, national defense, we will not be able to defend ourselves ultimately. And we can be as resilient as we can, but we will still be open to attack. So I think these things have to go together. Resilience cannot be seen as an objective in and of itself. It is all about resisting and denying the ability of any adversary to attack us, not just militarily, but also, as I mentioned earlier, to undermine our unity, to divide us, to undermine support for Ukraine, which of course is one of the big aims of this massive campaign of sabotage and hybrid attacks that we are seeing right now. And how can we do more? I mentioned the example of Sweden. I think sometimes we tend to focus too much on let's get more resources, let's reinvent the wheel. As Rasa was saying, let's look at the best examples that we have, and I would challenge the Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center to do a short list of good practice, national good practice, that can be easily shared, templates we can use. Let's look at Finland, what they do in terms of media literacy courses in schools. Let's look, as I said, at this Swedish booklet, If a Crisis or War Comes. Let's look at some of these basic concrete things The US, I was reading in the New York Times just the other day
Could you please
articles
try
again,
to
how we
finish?
prepare for hurricanes. So these things are valid for attacks. They're also valid for fires or hurricanes or floods, and they affect all of us. Thank you. Sorry for being too long.
Thank you, Ona. Mihai, over to you and to your speakers.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I will pass the floor to Victoria. We're all talking about resilience, but nowhere is resilience as important as it is in Ukraine, and it's very interesting to hear how you do it. Please, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, and kudos for the organizers. It's a fantastic opportunity to be back to Bucharest, where I was 2 years ago, exactly with some of what we say the roots for what European Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center put as an index. Can I ask for my presentation slides, which are only 5 slides and very short? I know that we are lacking of time. Thank you. And as you see from the title, I provocatively call it Deterring Armageddon, because that's in the situation from the geopolitical point of view. We, as Ukrainians, and I represent here, as I already mentioned, 2 capacities, Center for Defense Strategies, Kyiv-based think tank, but Center for Geopolitics. I'm a co-director of Future of Ukraine program. We are now. So deterring Armageddon, it's something that I literally say we have to understand where are we. So where are we in terms of the concept that I was preparing and actually presenting in November, exactly here in the House of Parliament, as being the first time invited by Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center, was this one. When the full-scale invasion happened, I was the head of what we say advisory group within the Office of European and Euro-Atlantic Integration under the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. And immediately our team put into the logic of analyzing and assessing how other practices, especially after COVID, was into what we say resilience. And that's why the toolbox that we presented 2 years ago exactly here was called Resilience Review in the 10 countries. Just because I'm lacking time, these are the brief things that I wanted you to share. And to tell you the truth, actually we were right and nothing changes in 2 years' time as it is now, but with some of the benchmarks as well as the advancements as we speak. So on the first one, you see, we were absolutely understanding already back in February 2022, but to tell the truth, as the scholars who work in the sector of security and defense and before, that we are preparing for a very long war. And therefore, as you see, there's a link of Ukrainian, what we say, strategic documents that we were preparing, and actually one of them is the baseline for the concept of the national resilience that was approved exactly in September 2021. And then the implementation plan where we contributed as the scholar, and me as well, is something that was advanced in November 2023, still active until 2025. To make the story short, what we did in this assessment is just we analyzed not only the, what we say, resilience as the concept within EU and NATO, but we also tested and made what we say qualitative and quantitative analysis for some of the member states. We took 10 member states, most of them are what we say neighbors of Ukraine in the EU and NATO speaking terms. And of course, we analyzed the benchmarks and the baselines, as you see, for the international frameworks. And let me come to very short, but at the same time, deep conclusions and where we are now as we are. So the conclusions we came back actually in April, that was April and May 2022, that NATO and EU are safe in terms because they are relying into the what we say international framework. And this international framework here is presented that the idea that in particular NATO and EU countries tend to combine development of national resilience capabilities with military, financial and other support from EU and NATO. So not only the national, but also what we say institutionally, what they're referring to, which refers to, there should be a mistake because it's not EU non-NATO countries to your right, is something that basically happening now, right? So when we are talking about geopolitical implications of Russian Federation, let's say coupling together with China, North Korea, and some other actors, that's exactly the answer. They tend to rely on their own national capabilities strengthened by geopolitical partners outside formal blocs and alliances, voila, forming new blocs. So we understood that immediately and voiced that better to our partners. Unfortunately, not being heard much, but maybe there will be a breakthrough now. In a nutshell, and because, as I told you, I'm very pragmatical Ukrainian, and let's say that I want to draw this picture where are we now, because if we're talking about the mindset, and mostly that we understanding that we are in the full-fledged war, but for Ukrainians it's almost the 11th year that we are there, we have to understand that even the approaches, so the instruments, the implications, but also the background where we are starting shouldn't be as we are on the peacetime deliberative, let's say, platform or framework. So therefore, I call this slide very easily. At the same time, we cannot rely on yesterday's tactics to fight tomorrow's battles. And that's basically how we are proving, and I'm coming back to what the organizers asked me to focus on. One of the solutions why the resilience, and was never mentioned by the indexes, thank you Arpat again for this, first of all, conclusion, but at the same time opportunity to refer to that, is just because one of the things that actually four things that none of the resilience indexes integrated is history. In Ukrainian case, it's horizontal-based connectivity. So it means the connection and social communication links that Ukrainians are having, and they were having it back in the old times. So it's not because of the mistrust to the governmental institutions, but also due to that and due to this, especially Soviet history times when you had to connect and actually create it and more for what we say horizontal connections. I would like to say that also in terms of digitalization, we made a breakthrough, and particularly not because of COVID, but even before that, and specifically in the advancement of 2022. We are focusing on the robust institutions, and each of the Ukrainian is actually, like me, we have 4 titles, it means jobs. 2 of them are official, 2 of them are volunteer. So in my case, I'm a Western educated alumni who is working within the Professional Governmental Association. It's a network of 3,000 alumni who were graduating abroad and then coming back to Ukraine to actually to make the reforms happening. And that's something that not so much exists in the EU and NATO countries, which I think might be very nice a case study for, let's say, resilience of the countries, because again, you can never measure it by the resilience index, and it's not there. Most of that is, of course, that led to the robust institutions. 3 hours, 3 days, and then not falling, right? It's 968 days already of the full-scale invasion. We are almost hitting the target of 1,000 days, and still the robust institutions going on. We have very high morale and motivation. That's something that is in the indexes, but not so much measured, as they say, and the rapid mind thinking. And that's very much into triggers when you are in the modus operandi of the war, unfortunately, that you literally try to boost into the innovations and then the creative thinking as much. The resilience index is not there, even it's very much close into that. And of course, the key factors that I can mention here, and I'll be very, very brief, what we as the Ukrainian scholars, not only abroad, but in Ukraine are working on, why it's important. First of all, is physical safety and foundation is for the foundation for recovery. That's why every Ukrainian knows the basics of the tactical medicine. Many of us are going to become psychologists, or at least to receive the basic support for the mental health, because that's important when you want to keep track, what we say, the marathon, which is happening as we speak. And at the same time, we are redesigning, redeveloping, and boosting our innovation, specifically AI component to many things that we are doing. We definitely understand we are very much dependent on the stable external financing, and that's why these political implications and the narrations and the victory plan of President of Ukraine was presented integrates one of these characters, because it's also something that we understand as of the end 2024. Critical infrastructure and let's say export capabilities. I do agree with the previous speakers that defense deterrence, as Joanna said, is key components for the NATO. For Ukraine, there is a third component, economic prosperity, because at the same time, the opportunity to deter Russian future attacks, to defend itself, of course, what a territory we are speaking about, but also boost economical effectiveness, investments, at the same time prosperity. This is what we see, a long-term marathon for also young generations to be in Ukraine and basically prosper there. And in this sense, when we're talking about environmental recovery as a part of the resilience, but at the same time, the motivation to stay or not to stay in Ukraine. And as you know, many of the things are happening. Last but not least, there are many points, but I will focus on there, is why Ukraine's resilience was there, because of the decentralization reform and actually empowering the regions. The regions in Ukraine, unfortunately, been voiced in the international media not accordingly. There's about 6 types of regions of Ukraine, those who were under or became under occupation since 2014, who became novelly and, let's say, occupied in 2022 and being released, those who became in 2022 occupied and not released for a moment, those who became the economies in the rear, like my region, Vinnytsia. I don't think you heard, but I really should, you Google, and Brussels team, we have Brussels-based office in Vinnytsia that I opened last year. That's important just to understand how dynamic the regional component is. And also those regions who are literally like Uzhhorod and Chernivtsi, something I talked with my colleague Mihai today, that never heard of the sirens because they are very far in terms of what we say where the tactical missiles are attacking or the sirens are happening. So this makes the things important. But the next, last but not least, is the things that I wanted to draw your attention on the AI profile and why Ukraine is very much invest in, let's say, not only the horizontal track, but also on the national track. This is what we say, the slide from the EU, what we say EU digital decade, or let's say the address of how the society should become more robust in terms of digitalization. I don't know whether we have time, but I will leave this message to more important slide is this one. In this audience, I can definitely tell it that the most of the modus operandi, what I was talking about, is, and I'm not going to use the cyber methodology or cyber terminology, we call it advanced persistent track or state, right? When the advanced persistent track or threat is that the adversaries are attacking you for a long time, you don't know about it, but at the same time you see or make the impact slightly later. Ukrainian cyber activists, and this this is a slide from State Communication Services. So I really recommend you to have a look at that, and I really want to point to 2 things. We call it advanced constant threats. So it means that the modus operandi that the Ukrainians in 2024 are making is that we are under the constant threat. So it means that the attacks are happening as we speak. And can I point here? To your left, you see the chart, the amount of the cyber attacks in the world. And you see almost half of them are happening on, let's say, targeting Ukraine. But on your slide to the right, you see what kind of institutions are being targeted. To your surprise, it's not critical infrastructure, it's educational institutions. So it means the academia, which are the most vulnerable as of 2024, which is interesting because Ukrainians are now in the modus operandi of re-schooling themselves or re-educating themselves. That's how they became the target. I want to point and stop here. I know we are lacking of time, but this is very important in the shift of understanding how the assistance of Ukraine should look. And then you come governmental institutions, critical infrastructure, and all of that. But the first target are all of us sitting here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. This really was a very interesting presentation, and we stand by you in everything that you do. And this is important to notice and say it again at every moment. Last but not least, Bogdan, on a very important and interesting topic, albeit technical one, on a multidimensional, multi-shock and multi-level diagnosis of resilience for the EU with a presentation also of the Regrow EU project and European Atlas of Resilience. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I also have a presentation. Okay, thank you. I would like very much to point out that my presentation will touch most of, if not all of the previous presentations, because during the past 6 years, we worked on the development of a resilience index. In fact, policymakers are asking for a resilience index, an overall resilience index. Or in order to build that, you have to use a multidimensional approach. What is this? During our project and afterwards, where I coordinated a team on spatial analysis, we worked on providing an understanding of resilience in relation to development, regional development, security, and so on. We also look at resilience as a product of several dimensions. We have individual resilience, security resilience, economic resilience, so on, so on, so on. And we also tested, okay, because making a model is good, but you need to test it to see if it works, to see if policymakers can use it. So we started from the perspective that resilience is not a 2-episode story before and after. In fact, it's a 4-steps story. There is the pre-shock, then is the resistance phase, how a territory reacts when the shocks arrive. There is the recovery, and then is the afterwards period. And each period say a different story. So you take into consideration each step of the resilience, and then you take into consideration each dimension of the territory. We look at the economic resilience, individual resilience, societal resilience, democratic resilience, institutional resilience, and so on and so on. Because a territory is complex. Earlier we discussed about system of systems. That's the territory. We need to fully understand the territory in order to fully understand the resilience. So this multidimensional topic is essential. We developed this model, and I will zoom in because this model has like 2 major steps. First, you need to choose the territory. You will measure the resilience for what? For a country. You'll have a value. You look at each region of the country, will have different values. We look at all the counties, all the departments, will have different values, different classes, typologies. We need to understand each territory. Then we have to choose the shock. Which shock we are going to measure? Economic shock, military shock, societal shock, sanitary shock, and so on and so on. And then we look how each territory behaves. In a second step, we do a typology, and based on the typology, we understand how each territory behaves and why. And afterwards, we will identify the resilience drivers, and we can go to the policymakers and say, those are the drivers. This will have the territory and this type of territory. And of course, this is a good as a theoretical model, but I said we tested. In fact, you can find all of our results until now on the website of the European Atlas of Resilience. It's free to access. There are several PDFs, easy to access, to read, with maps, graphs, explanatory text, and so on. I choose only an example, and this example shows how this model is applied. And I will zoom in, because I think it's difficult to understand like that. So first step is to understand the resistance. This is how the European region behave in terms of resistance for the economic crisis. We choose economic crisis because it is the shock. We had data before, during, after for a longer period. It's a clear east-west pattern. When we look at the recovery, we have a north-south pattern. And this pattern is also valuable when we look at the overall resilience measurement. This helped us identify a typology of territories. And this is the fourth step. And when you look at the map of each type of region, we can clearly see that the regions surrounding capital cities have different behavior. You look at Paris, Madrid, Prague, even Bucharest, lower resistance, higher recovery, meaning they are highly connected, first to suffer the shock, but first to recover. Most of the country have a similar pattern, but there are countries like Spain, where Catalonia, Cantabria have very different patterns. The Baltic countries, we always say the Baltic countries are the same. They are not. They are three different dynamics. And based on this typology that allowed us to see what type of territory we have, we looked at the overall image, we looked at the indicators, we looked at data for each region, and we identified drivers of resilience. And those drivers, this is only a selection. Okay, there are the usual suspects, like the innovation for the economic component, like the political stability for the democratic resilience, like the quality of governance, like count on help for individual and community resilience. So this is the final image, this is the final result that we can present to policymakers and say, measure this, look at this, if you want to build resilient territories. Of course, I don't have conclusion, but I have a couple of challenges that we encountered, and they are very difficult to overcome. And those challenges are mostly related to the fact that we did not find accurate data for all of the indicators, to the fact that most of the studies on resilience are focused on economic resilience, or more recently, military resilience, but there is not a focus taking into consideration the diversity of the territory. The focus on the individual and community resilience, which is highly important, lacks from most of the studies, and it's a shame. We had to go by proxy for some indicators, and that's a shame, because we have the resources to measure these drivers now that we know them. And finally, when speaking about individual and community resilience, there's still much to work to adapt those types of resilience in the resilience-based studies. Thank you very much. I tried to speed up to move. Thank you very much. I'm open to questions.
Thank you. Just a short notice before starting the question and answer session. Victoria had to leave for only a few minutes, so she'll be back. So both here and in Brussels, if there are questions addressed for Bogdan or Juana, or once again for the other speakers, for Frederick and Darpad, please try to address them and save the ones for Victoria after she comes back. So thank you very much for all the presentations. They were very insightful and interesting. And Yurai, you have something to say? I see that your mic is on.
Yeah, thank you, Mihai. And thank you also to the panelists in Bucharest for the insightful presentations. Yeah, indeed, we have a question here. We have one, but are there any more questions? Mindful of the time. So, go ahead.
Thank you very much. My question is directed mostly at Ms. Juana and the academia. So I'm wondering, in the context of the soon-to-be elections in the United States, how will the results of the US elections impact resilience within NATO, and what are your perspectives on this?
Thank you. This is the only question from Brussels. So, Mihai, if you have some questions in Bucharest, you can collect them and then have a short Q&A session or short session for responses.
Wonderful. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, the floor is yours. No one? I was expecting a little bit more from such a large audience, but yeah. Then I will take the luxury to address a question, and it's actually for Frederick, because he approached in your presentation, you approached a little bit the Sustainable Development Goals, and my question would be: is resilience a tool for measuring development, and is it something that we can teach to developing states and societies? And this is a particular question of interest for me because of my professional activity is in the field of sustainable development. Okay, please.
I have a question for Bogdan. In your remark, Romania is one of the few countries in the world that has two resilience indexes. In your study, have you checked if this capacity, the dynamics, also influence, let's say, the development of emergency services? So, the first line of defense, or you just keep it to operationalize it as capacity of, economic quality of. Have you checked this connection to what is, investment in very good emergency systems response?
So after building this resilience index, we try to check how this index is connected to other types of behaviors. So there are, the team is huge, 60 people involved. Some of them are still working on this connection. We connected with circular behaviors, sustainable development behaviors, for example. But until now, we did not did the full map of connection, the full network of connection. What we find for sure is that there is definitely a connection between individual society resilience and sustainable development and the circular behavior of people. We find that in terms of democracy and security, those are highly connected and then can be used in first line of defense. But there is still, we are still working on fully connecting all the dots on this index. So the answer will be partially yes, and the results are promising, but we do not have the full map yet, the full image of that network of connection.
And there was a thank you, Bogdan. There's a question for Oana, and elephant in the room: Trump and NATO's resilience. I know, Oana, you served during Trump's term, so maybe you have also some knowledge to share, maybe also on that. So here you go.
Yeah, I think NATO has to work with whoever's on the dance floor, as the new NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said. We don't have the luxury to choose. We don't have a vote in the United States. I think what matters is that both Europe and North America need each other, including to increase our resilience and to deal with this alignment of autocracies that we see. So, in a sense, we need to remember that the aim of our adversaries, whether it's in military terms or in terms of undermining our resilience, is to divide us as societies. Europe and North America, supporters of Ukraine and Ukraine. So I think because their focus is on division, our focus must be on how do we foster unity, both in terms of our own societies, our political establishments, but also in terms of our alliances, both when we talk about NATO and the European Union. But I would also say that the United States, of course, is a test case for hybrid attacks, for attempts to undermine our resilience and election integrity. And just in September, you may have seen that the US charged and sanctioned the Russian state media, Russia Today, for a widespread campaign to interfere with the US presidential elections. Basically, Russia Today paying in some way or another $10 million to a media company in Tennessee to create and distribute content to US audiences with hidden Russian government messaging. And I think the lesson there is not just the threat, but also some of the answers. And I think this clarity in calling out malign activities, attempts to undermine our resilience, is very important and needs to serve as a model, because what you saw the Attorney General, so you saw the intelligence and the judicial systems in the US getting together, making it public, sanctioning, taking steps. So I think we need to focus increasingly on solutions, not just on analysis. And if I can leave you with a final message is don't panic, be prepared. And I think that applies to our societies and it applies to individuals. And if you're part of the Uber Eat generation, make sure that your fridge is not empty and that you have enough supplies of water, food for at least 3 days.
Thank you, Anna. We can only echo this message, right? So we need to be prepared. That's the way how we build resilience. I don't see any more questions here in Brussels. So
we have questions already addressed here to Frederick.
So you're
so there's question from Frederick. Okay.
So you really want to answer to your questions, which is great. So the way I see resilience, and you talk about development, sustainable development, or something like that, we talk a lot about resilience in different contexts. You talk about war and climate change and all this type of thing, but think about resilience in an evolving threat landscape. So when you think of development, that's future development, sustainable development, you have different goals. But to reach your goals, you need to develop your society or your critical infrastructure, critical entity to be resilient. So they need to adapt to potential future situations. So if you think about critical infrastructure, most of them have been designed 70 years ago. They're at the end of their lifespan. They are in most countries not so good shape, so need to be replaced or things like that. But when you think about development, you need to think about the fact that your operating environment will change. So you will have new economic, social conditions, you will have new threats, new other things like that. So it's important when you think about development to include this element of resilience. And if you think in terms of, let's say, nuclear field or energy fields, there are lots of things about security by design, safety by design. We need to start thinking about resilience by design. So you have all this part, we talk about education, you have big part of education, critical thinking, preparedness, and all this type of thing. But you need to include in the development of our infrastructure society the notion of resilience by design. So the fact that it's all hazard approach, what could happen, and a lot of things could happen, and it's difficult to foresight everything. But we need to find a way to be sure that our domain, social type domain, will maintain some acceptable level of operation. So I think that resilience is a key component of development. I don't know if he answered your question or that's my personal view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Victoria hasn't returned yet, but maybe if you have specific questions for her, we can write them down and let her know when she comes back.
I had a question for Victoria about what can we learn from Ukraine in terms of resilience, because we saw President Zelensky's victory plan presented 2 days ago, yesterday in Brussels, and clearly there's a lot that Ukraine can do for Europe's defenses, as it's not only security consumer, but also can be security provider. That was my question for Victoria. But if Victoria is not there, at this moment, I think we can only wrap up here. at this stage, and maybe then we can come back to Victoria later on. I would just like, there has been a lot of talk about Finland and Sweden and this leaflet. And then also I once worked with a representative of the Finnish National Civil Preparedness Agency, and you can even do a test. So there is, if you go to their website, you can do a test how much your household is prepared for if crisis or for war. And there are points, for instance, if you have an axe at home, you get extra points. So there's also things, very practical things that I think are good practice and can help people to stay prepared and to improve our resilience. So on that note, I would like to thank our speakers in Brussels, Rasa, but also of course Oana, for staying with us longer than initially planned. But I think we had a great discussion, and I think we should cooperate and do more events like these, because sometimes in Brussels bubble, you tend to meet the same faces that are very nice and good people, but it's good to also expand and go to other places in Europe. So this will be my wrap up from our side. Thank you, European Atlantic Resilience Center for this opportunity. And this is all from the European Policy Center. Back to you, Mihai, in Bucharest.
Thank you very much. I will pass the floor to Arpad. We are still waiting for Victoria. Perhaps we have questions for her, but in the meantime, please, Arpad, you have something to say.
So 3 months ago, when I was asked by my colleague if I will want to coordinate a panel within the forum, I was worried that this might not be that so interesting, because sometimes it's a boring topic about measurements, correlation, etc. But I'm very happy that we had such a distinguished audience, and you kept that with us for more than 2 hours. So for sure, we will organize such events in the future. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Since Victoria is not here, I think I will ask her to contact you personally, Yuri, and answer your question. Thank you very much. It's been a very intense and interesting discussion that we've had here. I think. No. Thanks for organizing this event. Yes. Thank you. I address special thanks to all the panelists, first of all, and especially, of course, to the audience for keeping up with us and for having the patience to follow us through these intense 2 hours, more than 2 hours discussions. I think this shows that we are starting as society and societies in the same time to be prepared to what is to come and to try to focus on learning lessons and expecting tomorrow like we would be already tomorrow. Thank you to the Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center and to the European Policy Center. For me personally, it's been an honor to be here today. And I hope that the rest of the panels that are still to come, 2 more, I believe, right, are going to be just as interesting as this one. And we hope that this forum will become a tradition for Romania and for all our partner countries and institutions. Thank you very much to everyone, and I wish you all a very good day.